Have you ever given a highly toxic person a second chance? Did they immediately use that beautiful gift to hurt you even worse? We are falsely taught that endless forgiveness makes us holy saints. We are told that massive empathy will eventually change a bad person's heart. But the terrifying, dark, psychological reality is entirely different. Toxic people do not view your massive forgiveness as an act of grace. They view your quick forgiveness as a highly submissive act of weakness. They see it as a completely open invitation to destroy you all over again. Before we uncover the dangerous psychology of giving second chances, please take a moment to like this video right now. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful life lessons. In a deeply frozen, highly isolated kingdom surrounded by jagged mountains, there lived an incredibly wealthy, fiercely compassionate merchant named Valen. Valen had spent his entire life building a massive, highly successful trade empire. He possessed a deeply forgiving heart that was famous throughout the land. He had a childhood friend named Kale, who was entirely different. Kale was deeply arrogant, highly manipulative, and dangerously greedy. Kale constantly stole small amounts of gold from Valen's shipping ledgers. When Valen finally discovered the missing gold, Kale violently cried. He desperately begged for a second chance, blaming his miserable childhood. Valen's deeply empathetic heart completely shattered for his broken friend. He entirely forgave Kale and warmly welcomed him back into his inner circle. He foolishly believed that his massive, unearned mercy would deeply change the man. But human nature is incredibly dark and beautifully ruthless. Because Kale suffered absolutely zero painful consequences for his betrayal, he secretly lost every single ounce of basic respect he ever had for Valen. He did not see a kind, generous brother who had saved his life. He only saw a pathetic, incredibly weak fool who was easily manipulated. Just 3 months later, Kale orchestrated a massive, deeply devastating betrayal. He secretly sold all of Valen's highly classified trade routes to a rival guild. He completely emptied the massive iron vaults in the absolute dead of night. When Valen woke up, his entire beautiful empire was violently burned to ashes. He was thrown out into the freezing, dark mud with absolutely nothing. Kale stood on the grand balcony of Valen's former palace and loudly laughed. He aggressively mocked the deeply pathetic, foolish mercy of his former friend. Completely shattered and physically freezing in the brutal, heavy snow, Valen wandered deep into the dark, incredibly dangerous pine forest. He eventually collapsed near a small, highly fortified wooden cabin. This cabin belonged to an ancient, heavily scarred master beast tamer. The old tamer spent his entire life capturing deeply venomous, deadly creatures. He dragged Valen inside and sat him near a massive, roaring fire. He silently listened as the young merchant violently sobbed over his broken heart. Valen desperately asked why his massive, beautiful love was repaid with absolute evil. The old beast tamer slowly stood up and walked over to a heavy glass box. Inside the box was a terrifying, highly venomous black mountain viper. If you find a freezing, dying viper in the heavy winter snow, the old man growled, and you generously place it inside your warm coat to aggressively save its life, it will absolutely violently bite your heart the exact moment it completely thaws. You cannot aggressively love the deadly poison out of a venomous snake. You cannot use massive empathy to entirely reprogram a deeply toxic predator. When you constantly forgive a man who intentionally, violently harms you, you are actively holding the venomous viper directly against your own chest. The old master brutally explained the terrifying psychology of the narcissist. A manipulator actively tests your massive boundaries to see exactly what you will tolerate. When you offer a second chance, you completely fail their psychological test. You actively teach them that your personal boundaries are completely fake. Valen felt a massive, deeply painful shockwave entirely shatter his naive ego. He instantly realized that his massive empathy was actually incredibly toxic enablement. He spent the next 5 years aggressively rebuilding his empire in a neighboring city. He strictly operated with absolute, terrifyingly cold boundaries. He entirely refused to ever deeply trust incredibly flawed, manipulative people again. His new trade empire grew massively larger and vastly more powerful than before. Meanwhile, Kale's massive arrogance completely destroyed the stolen empire. He aggressively betrayed the deeply violent rival guild he had partnered with. The ruthless guild violently stripped Kale of his stolen, heavily unearned wealth. Deeply desperate, completely starving, and frantically running for his pathetic life, Kale violently banged on the heavy iron doors of Valen's new, massive fortress. He violently dropped to his muddy knees, desperately crying and heavily begging. He aggressively pleaded for a third chance, promising he had completely changed. Valen walked out onto the grand stone balcony and looked directly down at him. He did not wildly scream or violently curse at his former betrayer. He simply looked at the desperately thrashing man with absolute, terrifying silence. He slowly signaled his heavy guards to permanently lock the massive iron gates. He calmly turned his powerful back and entirely walked away into the warm light. He aggressively left Kale completely alone in the freezing, dark, muddy snow. This is a journey into the dark psychology of ending toxic cycles. It is defined by the absolute human need to fiercely protect your own survival. You must entirely stop aggressively offering your highly premium, expensive loyalty. Do not hand beautiful, priceless second chances to deeply venomous people. Every single time you eagerly take a highly toxic person back into your life, you are actively disrespecting yourself on a deeply profound psychological level. You are loudly telling the entire universe that you absolutely hate your own peace. Stop desperately trying to aggressively rehabilitate deeply broken, manipulative adults. You are not a highly funded rehabilitation center for toxic emotional vampires. Your beautiful, deeply valuable life is not a massive emotional dumping ground. The absolute highest form of psychological self-respect is the permanent closed door. It is the cold, terrifying courage to completely cut off a betrayer without hesitation. Let them violently scream that you're suddenly incredibly cruel and unforgiving. Let them deeply drown in the massive, agonizing consequences of their own choices. Forgiveness is something you aggressively do internally for your own mental peace. But access to your incredibly valuable life is a highly exclusive, massive privilege. If someone intentionally, violently breaks your deeply sacred trust, their subscription to your highly premium energy must be permanently canceled. Reclaim your absolute, undeniable power today without a single apology. Completely drop the heavy, exhausting burden of constantly playing the savior. Fiercely protect the beautiful, completely unshakable castle of your own mind. If you found true value in this dark psychological lesson today, please hit that like button right now to support the channel. Subscribe to the channel for more deeply powerful life lessons.